From fragile ceasefire talks in Kiev to growing geopolitical pressures in Berlin and Brussels, today's edition explores the future of leadership in wartime Ukraine and Europe's critical dilemma between Washington and Beijing. As political uncertainty clouds Ukraine's post-war horizon, international voices are calling for early elections to open a path for peace. Yet, the feasibility and impact of such a vote remains contentious. Meanwhile, in Europe, transatlantic tensions and China's expanding economic reach are forcing EU leaders to confront a profound strategic choice: stand by Washington's New World Order or explore a more balanced engagement with Beijing. I'm Mona Moselhi. Let's get in focus. With war still active across Ukrainian territory and martial law firmly in place, international speculation is growing about the potential of elections to change the course of the conflict. Could political transition in Kiev open a diplomatic path forward, or are such expectations disconnected from the ground realities? Now, in an article, Foreign Policy Analysis, why the push for early elections in Ukraine, increasingly echoed in Western discourse, may rest on false assumptions. The publication highlights how wartime conditions, military occupation, internal displacement, infrastructure damage, and legal prohibitions under martial law make meaningful elections nearly impossible in the short term. The piece also argues that calls for leadership change ignore the deep institutional and societal dynamics that shape Ukraine's political directions. Even a new administration, if elected, would likely maintain similar policies due to widespread national consensus on core security issues. Now, to explore this further, we're joined by Dr. Kamila Zarytsha-Romanovska, an international relations expert and legal counsel with experience in EU and NATO frameworks. Dr. Kamila, good evening to you and welcome to In Focus. Let me start here with the core issue. Why are early elections during war times considered unrealistic or even destabilizing?
Well, this is a very good question because many people doesn't really take into account that polling station in active combat zone, and actually this is a reality, or in the region under the threat of missile strikes, would fundamentally violate international standards of free and fair elections. Like, for instance, has been enriched in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. European Commission for Democracy Throughout, called Venice Commission, underscores many times that elections must be conducted in the conditions that guarantee universal suffrage, equality, and security, and those conditions are manifestly absent are in Ukraine today. We have to take into account that it's really important to act according to the law. And Article 21 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 25 on ICCPR clearly states that elections must be held with genuine participation, without coercion or exclusion, and under secure conditions. Voting would inevitably breach this condition, exposing voters to danger and distorting democratic legitimacy. Moreover, EU neighborhood policy and enlargement negotiation, which now also takes place when it comes to EU and Ukraine, really makes it clear electoral integrity is non-negotiable for democratic countries. That's the reason why there is such a strong recommendation coming from Brussels that to delay elections until martial law is lifted and the security is restored, because there is no legal or ethical shortcut to democratic legitimacy. And we have to take into account that according to Ukrainian constitution, for instance, Article 43.4, it provides the parliamentary terms continues until the cessation of martial law. That's a thing. Moreover, the Ukrainian law of legal regime of martial law, Article 19, states very clearly that presidential or parliamentary elections are explicitly prohibited during the periods of martial law. So the both premature elections would violate both international and legal and constitutional, in the context of Ukrainian law, in Ukrainian law, principles of pacta sunt servanda, and will basically breach international and domestic order. Let's not forget that over 20% of Ukraine territory is occupied now. Nearly 6 million, maybe more, Ukrainians are displaced. And the whole process will be absolutely logistically incoherent and will be clearly morally questionable and ethically more questionable, just to start with.
Right, but the US appears to support the idea of elections as a path towards peace talks. Now, what's your take on the strategic or the motivation behind that?
Well, this situation clearly shows that destabilization disguised a democracy, because call for election on this stage could reflect clearly more Kremlin-endorsed tactics designed to fracture internal cohesion in the Ukraine, as well as within the various international organizations, to delegitimize wartime leadership or to force negotiation under the pressure. But clearly, Russia seeks to instrumentalize democratic process to sow division. It is a clearly tactic which they have already proved to be useful during the Eastern European and post-Soviet states, and they actually acting this and using this quite often. This important thing is as well that there is no chance to credible polling suggestions in any likely winner would support Russian terms for peace. Rather than post-war politics may tilt towards hardened nationalists or military leadership, this is really difficult to actually really allow to natural evolution of wartime democracy have choice.
But we're speaking here we're not speaking here about Russia. Actually, we're speaking about the US, and it's the vision of the US.
That's the reason. Absolutely. And what can I see here is actually that US, by pulling this string, may actually trying to push as well to enhance ceasefire talks, to ensuring that this promise of Donald Trump to ensure peace within the Ukraine will be with a very dire condition and more or less achievable, because clearly what they would like to do and what we would like to see is to have someone being replaced as a president of Ukraine, and to have someone else with whom they might be, let's say, more aligned that with Mr. Zelensky. This is really important because we can see here some sort of shield against foreign influence will be lifted, and especially during the electoral campaign, there will be no possibility for many people to vote. Hence, it's quite possible that there will be some sort of, let's say, electronic ballots. And this might be really huge breach and huge threat to cybersecurity and transparency, as well as integrity of the whole electoral system, which previously was not known for Ukrainians. So this is a really, really difficult issue, because it seems like Mr. Trump would like to use this situation to actually effectively change a leadership within Ukraine.
But let me here get that clear. Now, we are aware, or it is obvious, that President Zelensky remains the dominant political figure in polls. Now, even if a rival was to emerge, now, would it shift Ukraine's current policy approach?
Well, I certainly doubt, unless there is the situation of, let's call it, miracle winner within the election. And that kind of serious interference with integrity of election within the Ukraine will definitely bring a shame, and it will be absolutely against the essence of democracy, because it's not only an act of voting, but this is as well assurance that such a voting will occur in peace, freedom, and fairness, and we cannot have it during the air raids.
No. What I'm speaking here, would another candidate change the Ukrainian approach to towards the negotiations and towards the whole aspect here?
I certainly doubt, unless someone who will be pro-Russian will win.
Mm-hmm. So from your point of view, do you think postponing elections until post-conflict stabilization would be a stronger path towards national legitimacy, and would that be much more better as Ukraine faces such the ongoing hostilities?
Absolutely. You put it very beautifully. That's exactly the thing. Let peace come first. Let's replace bullets, and only when the sword is not longer stained with the blood of Ukrainians and other nations who are fighting there. There is really important thing, and this is actually as well European Union perspective, that this is about having an active right to vote and an active right to stand and to be elected. Because with a presidential elections, straight afterwards will be as well call for the Duma election within the Ukrainian parliament. And then with those people being on the front and fighting actively, there is no chance that there will be a real representation of those within the parliament of Ukraine as well. War is not the time to choose to choose from the whole society new leadership. Right. And that's the reason why there is a wartime and maritime law, and that's the reason why this chain of let's say comment in the context of and in the event of wartime is clear, having a place.
It's this is clear. Mrs. Romanovska, please stay with us as we go into our second segment here. And as Ukraine navigates this difficult chapter, the intersection of legal security and democratic imperatives remains a delicate balancing act. As Ukraine faces questions about leadership and national cohesion, Europe is confronting strategic dilemmas of its own. The continent finds itself wedged between a long-standing alliance with Washington and a rising economic reliance on Beijing. At this crossroads, Brussels must decide: can it afford to alienate either power, or is neutrality even a viable option?
Donald John Trump. Mexico. Canada. Greenland.
As global power dynamics shift, the European Union finds itself under pressure from both Washington and Beijing. Trump's new global strategy demands clear alignments from allies militarily and economically, while China offers continued access to vast markets. How will Europe respond? Now, according to the Financial Times, the Trump administration envisions a new global alliance anchored by market democracies aligned with the US, requiring balanced trade and a united front against Chinese economic expansion. Europe especially Germany, now faces demands to reform its heavy model, rebuild defense capabilities, and reduce ties with Chinese industries. Meanwhile, EU debates over tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and growing tensions in NATO suggest a deeper crisis of strategic identity. Will the continent drift towards autonomy, maintain its US alignment, or seek a middle path? Right, back to you, Dr. Romanovska, the international relations expert and legal counsel. Let me again, let me go into the core of this segment, and with the big question: is Europe really being forced to choose between Washington and Beijing?
Well, that will be really easy to ask from the point of view of the, for instance, Donald Trump, because that's exactly what they are trying to lead us as Europeans. They try to show us that Europe cannot survive economically and strategically without choosing China or without choosing US. But this is a mischaracterization, because Europe is actively de-risking, not naively entangling with one or another. As European Commission June 2023 strategy on economic security states, critical sectors like green tech or in AI, for instance, being systematically diversified. Europe's strategy is calibrated. It protects open trade where it serves European interests, but asserts strategic controls where it must. That's actually what they're really trying to do, to achieve this balance and economic realism with a quite strong geopolitical vigilance. The coupling is all sake, neither wise, neither necessary would be, because clearly Europe's relevance stems from its sovereignty. It's not subordination. And emerging multipolar order, like we are having now, require from Europe to have its own pole on its own right. And for instance, Mrs. von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, said quite clearly that Europe needs to be an architect of new global order, not a subcontractor. And that's the most powerful message which comes both to Beijing and to Washington. Europe's relevance will be defined on its adaptability and ability to act independently, to defend multilateralism, and to mediate where confrontation looms. This will be really important, because that will now allow Europe's strategic value to be visible for both Washington and the whole world, because we cannot forget that European Union, which was clearly firstly an economic alliance, is something which is really important to us.
Right.
And it will do, and European Commission will do all what they can do to ensure that there will be no unnecessary sacrificing from economic competitiveness against US and China.
Right, but Mrs. Romanovska, let me get it or say it straight. Now, for an instant, Germany's export-driven economy is deeply intertwined with China. Now, how realistic is a strategic decoupling from Beijing?
Well, this is something we really we have to do, because de-risking from China is a realistic policy for European export-driven economy. It's not just a wishful thinking. The economic security strategy sets a clear pathway. We need to maintain trade in non-sensitive areas while tightly controlling technologies such as quantum computing, AI, and critical minerals are taking place. And this German recent China strategy, which is one of the first of the kind, also demonstrates how Europe's largest economy is shifting from dependency to diversification, particularly through reshoring supply chains and deepening ties within the Indo-Pacific democracies. De-risking does not mean disengaging, and that's a quite important accent here, because no single actor holds Europe hostage in the critical sectors, and that's pragmatism, not only wishful thinking, but this is as well, let's say, quite flexible, pragmatic, because we need to ensure integration and differentiated solidarity. We need to rediscover EU recovery fund, which after COVID-19, let's say, started with historic joint debt issuance, showed that solidarity of the EU must be designed in a flexible way to accommodate different economic needs,
right.
and especially now.
From a different perspective, defense remains a key point. Now, what would it take for Europe to truly stand on its own militarily without relying on US support?
Well, it's like Jens Stoltenberg recently, Jens Stoltenberg previously, and now Mark Rutte said that the welcoming greater European defense capabilities will complement NATO, but the EU, the European Union, focus on military mobility, cybersecurity, capabilities shortfalls, for instance, airlift, drones, etc., will directly support transatlantic objectives. Hence, as well, supporting EU, US as well connection in that field. Let's not forget that we do have, as European PESCO, which is Parliament European Structured Cooperation, or cooperation within the European countries. We do have as well a lot of investment within the new defense funds, which clearly are not only used to support our neighbors, but as well to actually review, or I don't want to use the word resuscitate, European defense and security sector of the economics, which now is actually something which is showing as well not only our digital sovereignty, but as well defense and security and weaponization and automation sovereignty as well in a global context, because it's not excessive militarization which could crowd out of necessary our investment. This is something which is dual use, let's say. This is digital investment, quite often social green investment, which are making European soft powers stronger. Clearly, European Union prosperity and influence will be built as well, and this is one of the contexts they do trying to do so, through wise alignment with Washington values. But they are finally ready and finally, let's say, paired with sober self-interest, both in economic and diplomatic affairs, but more importantly, with their own investment in the security and defense matters and the sector of our economies.
You're speaking here about the AI. You're speaking here about the AI initiative that was announced by von der Leyen and the 30 billion euros that would be given or submitted for the initiative. But Mrs. Rovaraska, China's economic footprint in Europe is or has been growing for some time, especially in key sectors like energy and mobility, also in the AI and the technology. Is that necessarily a threat to European sovereignty?
Let's look at all of this from the different perspective. We are not treating it as a threat because we don't want to have, let's say, difficult. We don't want to highlight the anonymity. But what we are trying to achieve as Europeans is to have this security sovereignty. For instance, concerning the semiconductors, we would like to invest European money to buy European issues, European, for instance, semiconductors, European technology, and invest within our own deep tech sector, which means as well that for the longer stand, European Union money, which are, for instance, with various different regional development funds, European Digital Europe Fund, or security in the funds, for instance, through European Defence Agency or Frontex Agency, they are aimed to ensure that from the cybersecurity point of view, from
clear.
the
we do understand your point here. You're speaking here about European coordination in every aspect. Dr. Kamila Zarycha-Romanowska, an international relations expert and legal counsel with experience in EU and NATO frameworks. We thank you so much for your thoughtful analysis. Now, Europe's decision in the coming years may not only redefine its alliances, but reshape the global order as a whole. From Kiev's fragile political horizon to Europe's strategic recalibration, today's discussions highlight how leadership and alignment are being tested across the continent As Ukraine waves democracy amid war and Europe navigates a narrowing space between East and West, the path forward remains as uncertain as it is consequential. We'll keep these turning points in focus. Many thanks for watching.